something he might later regret.
I would have, if I... The helmet hides his face, but not his humanity. Behind the Beskar armor of the Mandalorian and the haunted eyes of The Last of Us lies one man who made pain look powerful. Pedro Pascal didn't burst into Hollywood as a prodigy. He arrived quietly. A man scarred by exile, tempered by rejection, and defined by endurance. He is the internet's favorite father figure, yet his own journey began with a childhood stolen by dictatorship. He walked through decades of anonymity, from waiting tables to wearing one of pop culture's most iconic helmets. In an industry obsessed with youth and perfection, Pedro became a symbol of late-blooming greatness, a man who found light through loss, humor through heartbreak, and purpose through pain. So how did a boy who fled a regime become Hollywood's most beloved protector? This is the story of Pedro Pascal, the man who turned suffering into strength. Pedro Pascal was born in Santiago, Chile in 1975, during one of the darkest chapters in his country's history. Just 9 months after his birth, his parents, both young activists opposing Augusto Pinochet's dictatorship, were forced to flee. With danger closing in, they escaped to the Venezuelan embassy, carrying their infant son and a suitcase of fear. Soon after, the family was granted asylum in Denmark, and then a new beginning in the United States. Pedro would grow up far from the land of his birth, first in Texas, then California. While other children learned the language of comfort, he learned the language of survival, watching his parents rebuild from nothing, holding on to dreams that seemed too fragile to touch. He found refuge in the glow of a television screen. Movies became his sanctuary, Star Wars his religion, and Luke Skywalker his unreachable friend. In every hero's journey, he saw a reflection of his family's courage, a fight to return home, even if home no longer existed. Those early years carved something permanent in him: the quiet strength of an exile, and the unshakable belief that stories could save lives, maybe even his own. When Pedro Pascal arrived in New York City, he carried a single conviction: that storytelling could heal everything exile had broken. He studied acting at NYU's prestigious Tisch School of the Arts, but life outside the classroom was anything but glamorous. He juggled rent, rejection, and endless auditions, serving tables by day, memorizing lines by night. Casting directors liked his talent but hesitated at his name. Too ethnic, some said. Not leading man material, said others. For nearly 15 years, Pedro lived in the margins of fame. His face appeared briefly in shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Law and Order, The Good Wife, then disappeared again. Every success felt temporary, every opportunity fragile. There were nights when the silence after an audition felt louder than applause, but he refused to give up. Each no became another layer of armor. Each disappointment, another story he would someday tell. He once said, "Failure teaches you empathy." And maybe that's why, when his moment finally came, he played every role not as a star, but as a survivor. He didn't know it yet, but the world was about to meet Oberyn Martell, and everything would change. In 2014, the world finally met the man Hollywood had overlooked for decades. Pedro Pascal stepped into the brutal, sun-baked world of Game of Thrones as Oberyn Martell, a prince of charm and vengeance. With only 7 episodes, he did what few actors ever could. He turned a supporting role into a legend. Audiences were mesmerized by the confidence in his walk, the danger in his smile, the sorrow behind his eyes. When Oberyn fell, crushed in one of the show's most shocking deaths, so did the illusion that Pedro Pascal was just another actor. He had arrived, and he had arrived unforgettable. Then came Narcos. As DEA agent Javier Peña, Pedro channeled a different kind of power. Quiet, weary, morally torn. He wasn't the hero who saved everyone. He was the man who had seen too much, and still chose to keep fighting. Hollywood began to take notice. By the time The Mandalorian premiered in 2019, Pedro was no longer an outsider. He was the beating heart inside the armor. Viewers couldn't even see his face. Yet they felt his soul through every restrained gesture, every word spoken behind metal. And when The Last of Us arrived, Pedro became something more, a symbol of humanity itself. Through Joel Miller, he embodied grief, love, and the fragile hope that somehow survives the end of the world. He had spent a lifetime waiting to be seen, only to discover that true visibility comes not from being perfect, but from being real. In an industry addicted to perfection, Pedro Pascal's greatest controversy was simply being himself. He wasn't scandalous. No arrests, no meltdowns, no tabloid chaos. But in a world that rewards conformity, his kindness became an act of quiet rebellion. For years, Pedro faced the invisible walls of Hollywood's typecasting machine. He was too Latino to play the all-American hero, too soft-spoken to fit the stereotype of the tough guy, too sincere for the fake smiles of red carpets. He watched others rise faster, not because they were better, but because they fit the mold. Yet instead of bitterness, he chose empathy. He spoke openly about the immigrant experience, about being raised by exiled parents, about the dignity of those who never get their names in lights. When asked about politics, he didn't hide behind neutrality. He stood for human rights, for LGBTQ+ equality, for refugees searching for the same hope his family once did. Not everyone approved. He was labeled too political, too emotional, too outspoken. But Pedro understood something most stars forget, that fame without humanity is just noise. In the digital age, his warmth went viral. Fans called him the Internet Daddy, not as a joke, but as a reflection of how he made people feel. Safe, seen, and loved in a world addicted to cynicism. His greatest challenge was never scandal. It was staying gentle in a place that profits from cruelty. And somehow he did. Smiling, laughing, protecting everyone around him, both on screen and off, because for Pedro Pascal, strength was never about domination. It was about compassion, the most radical power of all. By the time Pedro Pascal reached his 40s, Hollywood finally caught up to what life had already taught him. That true greatness takes time. He became the rare kind of star who made success look like grace. No arrogance, no ego, just gratitude, humor, and a quiet sense of wonder that he had finally made it. In interviews, he laughed about his past failures. He spoke to young actors not about fame but about resilience. And in a culture obsessed with youth, he became proof that maturity could be magnetic. Fans adored him for his humility, his ability to turn every press junket into a comedy skit, every award show into a warm conversation. He was no longer the guy who finally made it. He was the man redefining what making it means. Off-screen, he used his platform to amplify others, supporting refugee aid programs, LGBTQ+ rights, and mental health awareness. He became not just an actor, but a symbol of kindness, a rare beacon of sincerity in a business built on illusion. Pedro Pascal didn't reinvent himself. He simply stopped hiding who he was, and the world fell in love with that honesty. Pedro Pascal's story isn't about overnight fame. It's about endurance, empathy, and evolution. From a child of exile to the guardian of galaxies, he turned pain into power and struggle into storytelling. He never needed to shout to be heard. He led through kindness, through laughter, through the quiet dignity of someone who has seen the worst of humanity, and still chooses to believe in its best. In The Mandalorian, he wore a helmet to protect a child. In The Last of Us, he carried one through the ruins of the world. But beneath both stories lies the same truth, that Pedro Pascal became a mirror of the human heart, flawed, wounded, yet endlessly capable of love. He once said, "Empathy is strength." And maybe that's his true legacy, reminding us that compassion isn't weakness, it's what keeps us human. Pedro Pascal's journey proves that greatness isn't about perfection. It's about how beautifully you rise after being broken. If you believe in stories that redefine what a hero truly is, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.